What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 11th, 2020, start of a brand new week of utter insanity by the powers that think they are. And we're going to get right on into the news here. Let's see. It's looking more and more like the coronavirus did leak from a Wuhan lab. Of course, if you're a listener of this show, we were talking about that all the way back in, I guess, February, where it just seemed like, yeah, somebody dropped a test tube and it walked out of the lab there. But apparently there's this Australian China expert, Professor Clive Hamilton, and he said basically the argument that the coronavirus emerged from the wet market just does not stack up. And they've apparently identified a female worker at the Wuhan virology lab, the BSL-4 lab, who appears to be patient 0. So it's basically out there. And yes, China handled it badly. They handled it, well, just like the U.S. government handled the shoot down of TWA-800, the way the U.S. government handled, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the way the U.S. government handled the assassination of Martin Luther King, and so forth and so on. Governments behave this way. You know, governments are generally not forthcoming. The Soviet Union, of course, was a master of that. It wasn't until Chernobyl, where they literally had run out of any other possible explanations, that they finally said, okay, you caught us. We blew up a reactor. Our bad. Sorry about that. But apparently it turns out now, and this is based partly on cell phone records and corroborated by some other information, but apparently the BSL-4 lab in Wuhan was shut down for 2 weeks in October of last year. So that's another indicator that they had an accident. They knew they had an accident. They were trying to sterilize the place. 2 whole weeks out there. Now, apparently somebody has hacked into the computers at the Wuhan lab and has discovered evidence of unreported COVID-19 cases and found evidence that records were deleted. So yes, there was a deliberate intentional cover-up. Bad China, no wonton noodles. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is trying to clean the egg off of its face here. And apparently, Tanzanian President John Magufuli was growing suspicious. So he played what local press describes as a trick on the organization. He sent the WHO 3 samples for testing. The WHO said they're all positive for COVID-19. The samples were meat from a goat, a papaya, and a pheasant, just little tissue samples. Now, the goat, maybe. The pheasant, maybe. The papaya, I don't think so. And the idea that all 3 came back positive. So this president of Tanzania is out there saying that he doesn't trust the World Health Organization anymore, especially with the allegation that Xi Jinping and the World Health Organization agreed to keep a lid on exactly what the origin of COVID-19 was. All righty, over in Germany, new virus infections accelerate in Germany. The R0 has risen above 1 for the first time since the lockdown has been lifted. Now remember, the R0 is the number of people any one patient is likely to infect. If you have an R0 lower than 0, then the infection is dying out. The number of new cases will be in decline. An R0 of exactly 1 means the population of people who are sick will be constant. The same number are getting well as are getting newly infected. Our numbers above 1, of course, mean you've got an infection that's spreading. So they're concerned that, once again, the infection could slip out of control, and they might have to actually backtrack and go back to the lockdowns here. In Berlin, meanwhile, riot police clashed with hundreds of protesters chanting freedom in a demonstration against the coronavirus restrictions. Germany's death toll has risen by 147 to 7,369. Okay. Over in Riverside County, California, they have rescinded the face mask and social distancing order. And the official order that came from the county of Riverside stated in part, with 30 million national unemployment claims filed as of this writing, it is imperative that our residents get back to work. So Trump is caught between a rock and a hard place. more concerned about the people, more concerned about the economy. And no matter which way he goes, somebody somewhere is not going to like it. But that's what happens when you're the president. And he did want the job. So let's get on to the Michael Flynn case. That is actually starting to drive coronavirus off the top of the news programs. In fact, Fox News, when I first turned it on this morning, they were talking about Flynn. They were talking about, Obama's comment about the rule of law and how nobody who was charged with perjury was ever just let go in history. Forgetting, of course, that Michael Flynn was never actually charged with perjury, and a member of the Obama administration was let go. But that's what Obama's saying. And I can understand his sense of panic, because if this starts to unravel any further, along with the final revelation that there was nothing to Russiagate, it's turning into Obamagate. And that's going to reflect badly, not just on Obama's historical legacy, which I'm sure he's worried about. It's going to reflect badly on all the Democrats in his administration, the party as a whole, and Democrats in general going into November. This is not a good situation. But Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, is out there saying Flynn was set up, and the setup was orchestrated by top officials in a meeting with Obama. It is now known for a fact that Obama knew what was going on, was in part directing it. And they were having meetings in the White House with then President Barack Obama about what was going on here. So the attorney is claiming Obama was in on the FBI plot to frame Flynn in the Russia probe. Meanwhile, Michael Pence is saying he would welcome the former national security advisor back into the Trump administration, which I think is the very least that they can do. Make amends to this man. Fortunately, it is looking like he's not going to need a presidential pardon, that he's going to be exonerated, his security clearance will be restored, and he can go back to work at the Trump White House. And I think that would be a really, really good thing. Another little article coming on out here, Sputnik News, talking about why Obama feared Michael Flynn so much. Was he that good of an advisor? Maybe. Certainly, he was opposed to many of Obama's policies and was in a position to undo a lot of Obama's policies under the Trump administration. So, now here's a good piece of information. John Podesta has admitted in testimony under oath that both the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign split the cost for the Christopher Steele dossier that launched the coup attempt. And of course, publicly on the news, they deny they had any knowledge about an arrangement to pay for opposition research on Trump. But of course, under oath, before the House intelligence investigators in December 2017, Podesta admitted that, yeah, the DNC and the Hillary campaign split the cost of the Trump Russia dossier, which now we know was a complete fiction. Ray McGovern's out there with an article. This one is in Blacklisted News, talking about how the twin pillars of Russiagate have crumbled. Now, for 2.5 years, the House Intelligence Committee knew Crowdstrike didn't have the goods on Russia. They didn't. It's all fallen apart. There was no Russian collusion. There was no Russian hacking. You were lied to again. And at some point, I find myself wondering, when do the American people have enough? When have you been lied to enough where you're going to stand up and say, I don't believe anything this government says. I don't believe anything the corporate media says. You're all a bunch of liars, and I'm just not going to listen anymore. I'll figure it out for myself. Thank you very much. So, apparently buried in the documents that were declassified and released last week is confirmation that there was ongoing communication between Seth Rich and WikiLeaks. Seth Rich, if you'll remember, was the computer expert for the Hillary Clinton campaign, who was murdered in what police insist was a botched robbery, because he was found shot near his home, still had his wallet, still had his watch, still had his cell phone, still had some other personal jewelry on him. Yeah, that's a botched robbery. Or it's a hit. think it was a hit. We know from the metadata on the DNC files that surfaced in WikiLeaks, they were not hacked over the internet because the date stamps are too close together. They were copied onto a flash drive at high speed and walked out of the building. We've long suspected it was Seth Rich who was doing it because he was appalled by what he was seeing going on in the campaign. He got the information to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks published it. Seth Rich got assassinated, for lack of a better word, and the leaks stopped. So there was no Russian hacking. There was no Russian collusion. The Russians were not the bad guys here. Actually, there was Russian collusion, but it wasn't with Trump. It was Hillary Clinton, the Uranium One deal. Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about how Russia has gotten control of 25% of America's uranium ore, and we don't have it to spare. We're not an exporting nation for uranium. In fact, we have to import uranium, but Russia got 25% control of our national ore stockpile. And at the same time, all kinds of money flew into the Clinton Foundation from Russia, from Russian sources, and nobody talks about that. That sounds like collusion to me. Apparently, the assistant housing secretary has released threatening text messages from Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell, which come across as threatening. Now, Michael Caputo has released these text messages from the virulently anti-Trump lawmaker from California, Representative Eric Swalwell. The text messages appear to prove that Swalwell, who spent the last 3.5 years calling for Trump's impeachment, has committed witness tampering. Because when you threaten a witness, that's tampering. It really is. This whole thing just gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. And we can count on the corporate media to turn a blind eye. Oh, let's talk about the black guy who got gunned down by the white vigilantes. That's news. Uranium Gate? No, that's not news. Obama Gate? No, that's not news. People don't need to hear that stuff. You know, we've got a dead black guy over here. That's what you should pay attention to, according to the corporate media here. Speaking of the corporate media, apparently over on Meet the Press on NBC, there was a video of an interview with Attorney General William Barr. And it was edited in a way that made it sound like his decision to drop charges against Michael Flynn was purely political. And it turns out it's another case of deceptive editing. And on Fox News this morning, they played the version that was aired on Meet the Press. Then they played the complete unedited segment and made it very clear that things were said by Bob Barr that were far more important that should have been in there. Now, NBC's already come on out and said, look, we only had so much time to fill, and it was completely accidental that it came out the way that it did, and we didn't mean to deceive our audience. You can trust us. You know, we're NBC, and we've got the peacock to prove it. So Donald Trump is urging NBC to fire Chuck Todd after the Meet the Press deceptive editing. And have you noticed, even as Russiagate falls apart, even as it crumbles to dust, even as it melts like the wicked witch of the West after getting doused with a bucket full of truth, they're already back out there saying Russia's going to interfere in the 2020 election. They're going to do it. You just watch those evil Russians. They're coming to mess in our elections here again. So cyber experts from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, who I wouldn't trust as far as I could throw them, and the FBI, same notation, have warned about the possibility of Russia's interfering in the 2020 presidential elections, according to a February memo obtained by Associated Press. International observers have explained what is behind the resurfaced Russia is at it again. So they're out there getting ready to, however the election turns on out, oh, Russia was interfering. Russia was interfering. They can't even make up their mind who Russia was trying to help in 2016. At first they said he was trying to help Trump. Then it came on out they were actually helping Hillary. Now, as you know, we're coming into convention season. The primaries are over. We're coming into convention season. And apparently the GOP convention is going to be held in North Carolina. Well, as it turns out, North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper, who's up for re-election this fall, has the authority to shut down the GOP convention because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, we all know Trump is going to get nominated as the Republican candidate for president of the United States of America. So it's not like they need a convention, but the Democrats are trying to find any way they can limit Trump's visual presentation on TV. They're getting ready to have a really spectacular convention, which may have some surprises in there. But if they can figure out a way where Trump's convention and even his large rallies, you know, he'll fill a sports venue of 25,000 people, they're trying to stop those too, because it sends an image that Trump is very popular. That worked for him in 2016, where he was filling these sports venues and Hillary couldn't even fill a bicycle shop. And the corporate media is out there saying Hillary will win in a landslide. She lost in a landslide. Now, needless to say, Governor Roy Cooper is a Democrat. So we'll see what happens there. Personally, if I were on Trump's team right now, I'd be working on a plan B, a second convention site in a GOP-friendly state. All right, let's turn to the international news now. Over in northwest Syria, clashes reportedly killed dozens in the biggest toll since the March truce. An attack by militant rebel forces in northwest Syria sparked clashes that left 48 people dead. Fighting has ground to a standstill, or had ground to a standstill following the March 6th truce in Idlib. Turkey is going to deem Libyan National Army forces legitimate targets if attacks against its interests continue. So Turkey is over there with the Libyan National Army downed 2 Turkish unmanned aerial vehicles as they attempt to attack its Al-Watiya military air base in the southeastern part of Tripoli. The Turkish Foreign Ministry has stated that Ankara will deem military commander Khalifa Haftar's forces legitimate targets if attacks against its interest and diplomatic missions continues. So let me see if I have this straight. Okay, there were 2 Turkish unmanned aerial vehicles that were attempting to attack a military airbase and they got shot down. And Turkey is saying, you can't do that. It's against the rules we just made up here. Let me see a full-on war happening there. Everybody's spoiling for a war. You know, the economy's shot, we can't fix it. Let's start a war. That'll take everybody's mind off of it. A massive bombardment has hit Tripoli. The water supplies are threatened. Apparently, Haftar fought overnight for new territory in the southern suburbs after losing ground recently around the city. Now, this next story, probably going to laugh about a little bit. The Iranian Navy was having an exercise, and one of their own warships shot another one of their warships, a corvette, with a missile, killing 19 and leaving 15 injured. And everybody's out there saying, oh, those gosh darn Iranians. And, pardon me, the Jamaran, or frigate, had been attempting to hit a target with one of its newer cruise missiles, but it accidentally struck a support ship named Konarak instead. Well, apparently, the missiles that Iran has do work, and they can cause damage, something that I hope those who are considering an attack on Iran will keep in mind here. Iran, meanwhile, has stated they are ready to swap prisoners with the U.S. without any preconditions. That would be a good thing. It would diffuse a lot of tensions were that to happen. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has ordered their staff out of Houthi-held areas of Yemen. Things are just getting a little bit tense over there. Claiming credible threats and perceived risks, WHO announced over the weekend they're pulling out of parts of northern Yemen under the control of the Houthi movement. This comes over mounting concerns about coronavirus picking up pace in Yemen. Meanwhile, U.S. support for Israel's annexation plan will spell war in the Mideast. Mark Dankoff, a journalist and former U.S. Senate candidate, made the remarks in a phone interview with Press TV on Friday. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and the reminder that Republic Broadcasting Network is in a perpetual fundraiser because we need your help to keep on doing what we're doing, which is speaking truth to power and sorting out all the confusing lies and deceptions that we are all buried in right now. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. Getting on back to the news here, Israel has attempted to block an attempt to relax international sanctions on Tehran over humanitarian concerns in recent months, mostly about combating the coronavirus. Iran has become the Middle East epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. So Israeli outlet Haaretz yesterday cited unnamed Israeli diplomats saying the Jewish state tried to exert pressure on international institutions against the easing of sanctions on Iran as a humanitarian gesture, even as the Islamic Republic struggled to contain a sweeping outbreak, which sounds about usual for Israel. Beijing is intensifying its military presence in the South China Sea in light of growing U.S. activities in the region. China still has major interest in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. Yes, I can imagine we have something. The South China Sea is disputed. Okay, the Gulf of Mexico is disputed. The Gulf of Baja is disputed. Really? I think if you look at the name, South China Sea. And remember, that whole area was recognized as Chinese territory at the end of World War II with what was called the Cairo Convention. Now you have all these other countries in the area saying, well, you know, we've changed our mind. We want those islands. We want the oil. We want the military advantage. And the U.S., which signed the Cairo Convention, I might add, is siding with the other countries and saying, you Chinese, you get out of the South China Sea. It's not yours. It belongs to our friends. Now, of course, the excuse there is upholding freedom of navigation in the region. Well, doesn't that apply to both sides? Are not the Chinese free to navigate in that part of the world? Just something to think about. All right, we're still seeing the aftermath of that horribly botched attempt to kidnap Venezuela's President Maduro, put him on an airplane for the United States. And apparently the contract for this operation has come on out. Guaido is definitely involved in all of this, and the contract was worth a total of $213 million. And the contract was made with the private military company Silver Corps USA, which is run by that former Green Beret. And apparently the document was provided by the Venezuelan opposition itself on a condition that one of the attachments be redacted. And that's what they literally had a contract. Say for $213 million paid thus and such, we will capture, detain, remove Nicolas Maduro. Here. So some of the highlights in the contract are cancellation of the contractor of a non-refundable advance for $1,500,000, which had to be paid during the first 5 days from the signing of the contract. The initial 45-day phase of the operation with a value of $50 million, which includes operational costs, both for the group of allies and Silver Corps personnel, vehicles, transportation, and fuel. The total estimated cost of the project, $212,900,000 for 495 days, because the occupation force would have to remain in the country. All very businesslike. All very formal. Yes, for so much money, we will steal a country for you. Right out of Quantum of Solace. All right, U.S. Navy sends ships to confront China and warns China against bullying. I hesitate to see how China's warships in the South China Sea represent bullying. I mean, it's easy to see how American warships in the South China Sea would be seen as bullying, but not the Chinese. China's building up the area. They're enlarging those islands. They're putting in airfields. They're putting in oil infrastructure. But once again, the U.S. Navy is sending ships into the South China Sea deliberately to confront China, and Commander Admiral John Aquilino says the U.S. insists the Chinese Communist Party must end its pattern of bullying. Wow. I mean, talk about arrogance. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Look at the history of the United States over the past close to 2 decades now. Who is bullying who? All right, let's talk about the economic news. Actually, we're coming up on another commercial break. When we come on back, we'll be talking about the economic news and a few other little bits and pieces as well. So stay tuned. We'll be back after these words from our sponsor. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to talk about the economic news here a little bit. And there's a former JP Morgan economist who's out there saying that we've been blowing a whole new bubble of the economy ever since 2009, and that we're heading toward a Weimar Republic inflation setup. And it does seem like that's the way that we're going. They're trying to inflate the debt away. They're trying to inflate the economic harm from the coronavirus. They're trying to inflate that away. And, you know, I'm not opposed to that latter part. Americans are hurting. They're hurting very, very badly right now, and they need all the help they can get. But let's be honest, the economy was already in trouble long before the coronavirus came along. You have this ultra-loose monetary policy coupled with deflationary pressures from increased aggregate supply, investors chasing yield at ever higher risk, and it meant that almost all asset classes had reached all-time high just before entering the current bear market. There is a massive bubble. There is no doubt. And readers will have anticipated it didn't have to be a global pandemic to burst this bubble. The bubble was looking for a prick, any prick, to burst it. And now we're into it. So anyway, up in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, homeless tents have increased by 300% since the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. The streets are unsanitary, unsafe, often impassable. But again, before the coronavirus, we had homeless all over this country. And you can't tell me that we've got a good economy when there are that many homeless people, that many people out of work. Meanwhile, of course, the borders are open and illegal immigrants are coming on in to chase after the few jobs that are available in competition with legal American citizens. And I think that's wrong. I think that's absolutely wrong. Apple has decided to move a fifth of iPhone production from China to India. The massive supply chain shift. China's going to pay a price for the COVID-19. It may not be official. It may not be in the court. But you've got Japan is pulling their manufacturing out. Now Apple is moving a fifth of iPhone production from China to India. And to further complicate things, Trump and semiconductors companies, including Intel, are seeking to kickstart new chip plants right here in the good old United States of America. That's another area in which China enjoyed a tremendous amount of success. So China's economy it's under attack. And of course, this serves U.S. interests quite a bit because the United States didn't want to have to compete with a healthy China economy. So now China's economy is being made unhealthy. The truck driver apocalypse is here. More jobs were lost in April than in the entire 2008 financial crisis. 30 million plus. We probably have people who lost their jobs who were not able to get into the unemployment offices. The lines were always busy. The doors were always closed because of COVID-19. Phones weren't being answered. It would actually be a lot worse than 30 million. All right, so let's talk about Ahmaud Arbery. Now, he is the black gentleman. His family says he was just out for a jog, and he was shot and killed by two white guys. And of course, immediately this became the star story in corporate media. Oh, we've got the poor dead black guy, and he was just gunned down by these white supremacists, and they're going to town on it. And the Atlanta mayor is calling it a lynching. He's bringing up references to Jim Crow era South, and they're blaming Trump. They're saying Trump's rhetoric basically gave racists permission to do it in an overt way. Well, maybe, maybe not. Anyway, there's this Georgia man, 20 years old, he set up a fake Facebook page in support of Ahmaud Arbery's two killers and threatening protesters who paid their respects at the spot where the 25-year-old jogger was killed. Turns out the man who set up this Facebook page is black, and he was putting deliberately provocative messages in there to make anybody supporting the two shooters look bad. Game there. And here's where it gets really interesting, because security video shows Ahmaud Arbery inside an under construction home on the same street where he was killed. Now the home is under construction, it's just the raw lumber, and he just walks on in. Now it's not his home, but he walks into the construction site and he looks around, and then he left empty-handed. Now his family is saying this proves he was not a burglar, that he went into this one property and left without taking anything with him. Well, construction site, there's really not that much to take. Apparently, another video has now surfaced showing Ahmaud Arbery going into somebody's home, trespassing, which the owner says was robbed of $2,500 worth of fishing gear earlier this year. Then a neighbor spotted him in the house, called 911, and at that point he took off and ran down the street, and that's when he ran into the two white guys. So this story is getting very, very murky. They're really starting to dig at it, and it's looking like Ahmaud Arbery was not just a common everyday jogger. He wasn't shot just for being black while running. We've got two different videos showing effectively illegal behavior. Because even though he didn't actually take anything from the construction site, he still was not supposed to be there. And he did trespass into a home, was spotted by somebody who called 911. Now, we need to be very, very careful about revenge, especially if we don't really know what happened. But apparently, there was a 80-year-old couple were in a Delaware cemetery, and they were basically visiting their son's grave at a veteran's cemetery, and they were shot. A black male with a sniper's rifle. And as near as they can figure out, it's a racial revenge shooting motivated by the Ahmaud Arbery incident. So this white couple was murdered by this black guy. It's not getting the coverage on the corporate media that it deserves. Facebook is at it again. They're starting to remove news outlets from... There we go. I had the wrong handle. Facebook removes news outlets in latest Orwellian purge. Over the past 3 years, Facebook has been removing accounts for participating in what they call coordinated inauthentic behavior, which is a fancy word for saying all of these people are saying the government is wrong about, well, like the Boston bombing. And therefore, it's coordinated and it's inauthentic behavior because it doesn't support the mainstream view. Well, maybe they're all in agreement that the government did something wrong because the government did something wrong. In any event, in the latest purge, Facebook has removed accounts from 2 news outlets, Southfront and Newsfront. Somebody needs to bring back the Cherry Sisters lawsuit and remind everybody that the First Amendment does apply to non-governmental entities. Anyway, Google is trying to establish a monopoly on speech. Remember their Google motto and code of conduct for 15 years was "Don't be evil." Then in 2015, they changed it to "Do the right thing." Today, Google, which owns YouTube, seems to have altered its motto to "Be evil" and "Do the wrong thing," including censoring free speech of doctors, scientists, professors, politicians, and journalists whose ideas differ from those of the Google executives. Well, Google's a large company. It's a modern success story. But being an executive at Google does not qualify you as an expert in fields like medicine, physics, astronomy, chemistry, so forth. So Google CEO Eric Schmidt said this is the next step in the evolution of the internet, referring to Google's purchase of YouTube for $1.65 billion in 2006. We now know Schmidt's definition of progress centers around inducing users to think like him, by using YouTube to push dissenting views and censor differing perspectives under the guise of legality or neutrality. And they're anything but neutral over there. And as far as the legality is concerned, there has to be something in these tens of thousands of books of law that have evolved over the last 270 years. There's got to be something in there that says, yeah, the First Amendment is an absolute. The right to freedom of speech is an absolute. It's not just reserved for free speech zones. It's not just reserved for when you're standing on the steps of a public building. It has to be everywhere, or it's completely worthless. CNN just called One American News Network, quote, more state-run propaganda network than a credible news organization, end quote. Now, CNN botched the death of Kim Jong-un. They covered up for Chris Cuomo after he broke quarantine. They published lies about Elon Musk, and that's just in the last month. They also told you Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, that Assad was gassing his own people, that the Tsarnaev brothers blew up the Boston Marathon, and so forth and so on. And now it's here to tell you which news networks are credible. And getting out my little crystal ball, I can look into it and see CNN says that CNN is credible and everybody else is not. This week, Vanity Fair kicked up a flurry of controversy when citing those pesky anonymous sources. It claimed Donald Trump Jr. secretly bought a stake in the right-leaning One American News Network. The owner of the network, Charles Herring, quickly jumped in to quash the claims and denied any such deal had gone through, as well as demanding that a retraction be made. The corporate media isn't learning from its declining audiences and declining revenues. They're out there. In fact, I would say they've gone the other way. They're panicking. They're beginning to understand they have lost the war for the control of the American mind. And they're trying to figure out how can they get it back without running into that pesky First Amendment. All right, over this last weekend, we had a polar vortex that unleashed a rare May snow in New York, shatters historic low temperature records. We had a freeze warning right here in Indiana. Of course, farmers are now concerned about the early crops that were just starting to come in. Did they freeze? Did they get damaged? So there were freeze watches, warnings, along with frost advisories in effect Friday night in parts of the Midwest, down to the southeast and into the northeast. Cities like Atlanta ended up being colder than parts of Alaska on Saturday morning. Gee whiz, where's all that human-caused global warming that we were being told about? Just seems like, you know, it must be hidden in a closet somewhere or hiding at the bottom of the ocean. Remember when they tried to sell us that one? So, and it's still unusually cool here in Indiana, which is odd. We had a really mild winter, according to the locals, and I thought, well, we'll probably have a hot, sweltering summer, but so far, not there. All right, something I have been warning about happening has happened. Apparently, a Russian rocket disintegrated in Earth's orbit, leaving behind at least 65 pieces of dangerous space debris that could conceivably impact and damage other satellites. They, in turn, would break into pieces and have more debris floating around that could damage yet other satellites. It could start a whole cascade and turn near-Earth orbit into a shrapnel field. It would take 100, 200 years for it to clean out under natural forces. And this is why I'm so opposed to this race for, you know, the Space Force and weaponry in space. You could literally encase the planet Earth in a shell of orbiting debris that makes space exploration, not to mention commercialization, impossible for the foreseeable future. So, anyway. Over in Rome, earlier today, as the city tries to adjust to life following the coronavirus lockdown, they actually had an earthquake. Magnitude of 3.3, that's minor for those of us who lived in Southern California, and it struck at 5:03 a.m. with an epicenter in Font Nuova, a small town about 10 miles outside the capital. Town's rocking and rolling. Okay. A Dutch researcher has detailed 9 attack scenarios that work with all computers with Thunderbolt, shipped since 2011, which allow an attacker with physical access to the machine to quickly steal data from encrypted drives and memory. Researcher Bjorn Reutenberg detailed the so-called Thunder Spy attacks in a report published yesterday, warning the attacks work even when users follow best security practice, such as locking an unattended computer, setting up secure boot, using strong BIOS and operating system account passwords, and enabling full disk encryption. So this one is really very, very nasty. Okay, over at Government Slaves Now, they're running an article that the polls showing Joe Biden in the lead over Donald Trump are about as accurate as the polls back in 2016 that were showing Hillary Clinton in a landslide victory over Donald Trump. So the polling companies haven't learned anything from their past embarrassments. And apparently Biden had another hoof and mouth moment when he was being interviewed about Tara Reid. Okay. Retail investors are pumping the market, and why we may be nearing the top of the bounce seen at the end of March. I mean, everybody's looking at the stock market, and it didn't do too well today, kind of fizzled at the end there. It started low and worked its way back up to the green. But it's overvalued, and everybody knows it's overvalued. And at some point, something's going to happen where it's going to start plunging, and all the little safety locks that they have are not going to stop it, because the value of the stocks is disconnected from the underlying worth. I think the current average PE is running something like 24. And in a healthy market, it's usually closer to 16. From all this rigging that's been going on, the plunge protection team, whatever you want to call it. They're gaming the system because the system has broken down. Because the system was never designed to perpetuate. Private central banking cannot be made to run forever. Sooner or later, that accumulated debt rips it all apart. And I think we're there. And I think that other analyst is correct. We're on the verge of Weimar-style inflation, needing entire carts of paper notes just to buy a loaf of bread. At least it'll end the toilet paper shortages, right? Okay, we're going to take another break here for commercials here before the last segment of this hour. Starting at the top of the hour, we will be taking phone calls, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. A couple of stories to get us to the top of the hour. We were talking before about Crowdstrike. Now, Crowdstrike was the company that was hired by the Hillary Clinton campaign to manage their servers and security. And we were told that Crowdstrike found evidence of Russian hacking for the DNC emails. Well, Crowdstrike has now gone public saying that no, they didn't. There was no evidence Russia stole emails from the DNC server. Of course, we already knew that because of the metadata. Now, of course, we've got confirmation that Seth Rich, who was gunned down near his own home. And by the way, somebody reminded me in an email, he was still alive when they got him to the hospital. So not just a botched robbery, but a botched assassination. Somehow he died in the hospital. Put him down as a COVID-19 death, I guess. So Crowdstrike is out there saying, no, we did not see any evidence whatsoever, which is a little overdue because if you'll remember when Crowdstrike first supposedly came out and said, yes, we found evidence of Russian hacking, and they described their methodology, other computer security firms looked at it and said, no, this wouldn't work. This absolutely would not work. The case is not made. Truth finally caught up with them. There was no Russian hacking. And again, you have been lied to all this time. The U.S. government controls you by lying to you, by giving your brain only that information that will lead you to decide of your own free will what the government wants you to decide. I'll give you an example. Babysitter and a small child. The babysitter tells the child, you can go to bed at 8 o'clock or you can go to bed at 9 o'clock. Which do you want? And the kid says, well, I want to go to bed at 9 o'clock. The babysitter says, okay. The real goal, of course, is to have the kid asleep by 10 o'clock when the babysitter's boyfriend comes over. That's how propaganda works. Kid thinks he's got a choice. He doesn't really. He's been tricked into thinking he's got a choice. He's been lied to. You've been lied to about Uranium Gate, Obama Gate, Russia Gate. Time to start getting angry, because when the government lies to you, they do not respect you as a human being. They do not respect you as a citizen. They're treating you like you are that child. Their goal is to get you into bed and sleep so you're out of their way. Anyway, before on the show, we were talking about what the real unemployment may be because of all those people who couldn't get through to the unemployment offices. And over at Investment Watch blog, they have an article that the real unemployment rate is probably about 35%, which is worse than the Great Depression of the 1930s. So you think about that one for a while. Are these jobs going to come back soon? We certainly hope so. But it takes a while to build a functioning economy. There's a tremendous amount of inertia there. And now all of a sudden we're dealing with people who have realized they get more money staying at home on unemployment than they do going back to their jobs. Okay, there's the music. We're going to take a break for station identification. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Put you on the air with your comments, questions, opinions, and observations. Let's go to the phones now to Peter in Los Angeles. Peter, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was listening to what you said about a half an hour ago about bullying in the South China Sea and China and everywhere else in the world. And I'm sure that a lot of the listeners are aware that I spent a good deal of time in the military. And as a lot of you guys who are, and I'm your age, Mike, but I know that Joe was a veteran, and Terry and Dan and Mark from North Carolina and others. I can tell by just, even when they don't say it, I can tell sometimes that they are veterans. But my daughter, I have an extraordinary daughter, came up and asked me last Veterans Day when I went to the school, and she wanted me to go to school, and the parents who were veterans sat up on a little dais and all that, and I stood up and waved. And then she asked me afterwards, she said to me, Dad, I know how disillusioned that you are. What made you decide to do that, right? Do all the things that you had to do? We had just watched the movie Shane the night before. I'm sure everybody's seen the movie Shane with Alan Ladd. And I said to her, I grew up with stuff like that, and there's a scene in that movie where the little kid, Brandon the Wild, the settler is about to go in and get his butt handed to him and by a gunslinger and all that, and the little kid says, Dad, Shane's coming. And the music rises, and and that's what I believed. I believed that I was there, and I took my oath seriously to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I did my heart. I went to OCS. I was an honors graduate of every school that I've ever went to in the military, from basic training to Command and General Staff College. I really took it seriously. I went to Ranger School so that, when the stuff got serious, I would be best prepared just to handle my men and make sure that most of them got out. And then after a while, Mike, and I had a pretty good career growing, I just couldn't take it anymore because of this bullying thing. Because I didn't see one thing that I ever did in the military. And I've been to Korea and the Middle East and Europe and Central America. I've been all over the place. And not once could I say to myself that I was defending the Constitution and the American people. And this is probably people are rolling their eyes at this, but I don't have any faith a friend of mine asked me the other day, can you think of one institution in which you believe? And I really couldn't think of any. And I just wanted to share that story. I went in thinking that, I was going to protect the people who couldn't do it, hold the line in Europe against the Russian hordes and blah, 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 and stand up for democracy and the Bill of Rights. And it's not that way. And I'm sure quite a few of I'd still do it if the Bill of Rights were in effect. If the Constitution were being honored, I'd still feel that way. But it's not. That's my comment for the day.
Now, can I ask what rank you attained before you called it quits?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Wow. Okay. Now, I've mentioned this before on the show, but I'm going to mention it again. There was a treatise put out called War's a Racket, was written by Major General Smedley Butler. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Sounds like you had the same experience.
I would tell you that I can hear it sometimes in the voices of some of the callers. I mentioned a couple of them.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at. And I mean, I love my country hugely. I would do anything to defend my family and my country and the Constitution. But that's it. I draw the line at that. So, anyways, and people wonder why I'm so down on Israel and the American Jewish community, who's taking away our First Amendment and Second Amendment rights, by the way, in order to not be criticized. And they've been running our foreign policy. And half the stuff I did in the military was for their benefit and not ours. And it really rankles me, man. So I hope that explains some things to some people out there.
Well, I know this is going to sound like a cliche, but thank you for your service, regardless of what it was. And obviously, your motivations were the right ones. And like so many other who join the military for the right reasons, they get used for the wrong purposes.
Well, all right. Thanks very much, Mike. I'll talk to you later.
All right. We're going to switch over to Don in Arizona. Hello, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike. I was in the military, and I went in as a cook and spent 2 years in the Army. Then I ended up going to the National Guard. And the National Guard was more laid back. Peter, maybe he would have liked it more if he would have tried that. It's because you do one weekend a month, and then you forget about it the other 28 days of the month, And then once a year you go on that 2-week thing. So you don't get as much money, but you still get a pension if you stick it out for 20 years, so it wasn't that bad. But, I want to talk about this corona, I call it corona baloney.
Okay.
We don't know. These guys don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, every state's different. What are they going to do now? Like right today, they started to open restaurants in Arizona. Well, why can't they open everything? Now, when are they going to open the swimming pools and the gyms? Sooner or later, they're going to open everything. The thing about it, Mike, a virus is not going to disappear anyway. I mean, what do they think it's going to do? Just disappear? The virus will disappear? The virus is always going to be around, right?
Yes.
And they think, well, this is a power grab. I can understand that part of it. They want to sell these vaccines, but still it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the virus will be here. It will mutate, and people talk about the economy being wrecked. Right, the economy is wrecked, but also people's lives are wrecked. What about somebody that wanted to play baseball this year, or track and field, some athlete, or what about musicians? All of a sudden, they can't do anything. They can't play. I'm a musician. I play open mics. I can't do that anymore. A lot of the things that make life worth living are just, no, you can't live. They're trying to turn everybody into a slave, is what it is. And it doesn't make anybody healthier. It makes people unhealthy. sit in their house, not be able to go to the gym and get their exercise. I mean, if they would track it down, some people are going to start having heart trouble and high blood pressure and this and that because they're not going to the gym. They need the gym or the swimming pool, some of these places to exercise. They need that. I do. I mean, I have stuff I can still do here in Arizona. We have the bicycle trail and stuff, but I can't go swimming. I can't go to the gym. It's closed. And, and after they open this, they're going to try to keep social distancing. That's ridiculous. They can't do that. And try to make everybody wash their hands constantly. Nobody's going to wash their hands constantly. So, I mean, this whole thing was a wasted effort. We have, 30% unemployment. The economy's never going to come back. This guy, Jason Goodman, he's done a lot of good shows walking around New York with a camera and talking to, sometimes he talks to Charles Ortel. Well, like he says, these small sandwich shops, look at this sandwich shop, they can't pay the rent in New York City. They're gone. A lot of these small restaurants, small shops, they were barely making, they're gone forever. They'll still be, some of the big chains will still be, come out ahead on the deal because they're running out the little guy. But, the economy, the airlines are gone. By the way, why can't they fire everybody in TSA right now while they're at it? Are any of them getting laid off while there's no airlines? Right, there you go. I mean, this is all a big power grab by the government, and it's wait a minute. These the people, like Dr. Judy Mikovits, I don't know exactly how to pronounce Mikovits. I've had her pronounced different ways, but she's an anti-vaxxer. I'm an anti-vaxxer, but because of the fact she's an anti-vaxxer and she's a scientist, they won't let her. Anything she says is censored on YouTube, and they try to censor it on Facebook too. She can't say anything. Well, she's written a couple books, and some of her stuff does come out on her interviews and stuff, but. The thing is, this is a big power grab. They're trying to sell. They're trying to turn everybody into a slave. You got to get your vaccine. I just wonder what's going to happen in the near future here because people. I'm not going to get. I mean, a lot of people. Most people will go ahead and give me a shot. They don't care. They don't. But I just don't know. What the hell's going on? The dollar will lose its reserve status. What's going to happen next? I don't know, Mike. This is where the Chinese says it's a curse. May you live in interesting times, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to let you go, Mike. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, thank you very much. The Chinese curse is actually may you be a person of importance in interesting times. And I understand why that is a curse. Let's go back to the phones to Matthew in Pennsylvania. Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just had an issue with something one of the callers said the other day, and you seem to agree with, is that anybody that took a firearm to a protest would be an agent provocateur. And my question would be, why wouldn't you be armed?
Because I wouldn't want to send the wrong
armed.
impression to Mr. and Mrs. America.
Well, if you go to, let's say you go to a protest and you have no ill intentions and you are not armed, and in some of the cities, what's happened to the protesters that were not armed? When there was no armed presence in the protesters, the police felt like they could do what they wanted. So I believe there was some pepper spraying and some general abuse going on. In the states where there were armed citizens, legally armed citizens, protesting, there was no pepper spray or abuse, and nor was there any violence from the armed protesters. So a police officer is going to be, I would say, 100 times less likely to just abuse their authority if they know that the person they're attempting to, overuse their authority with is armed. And I don't think just because people are going to a protest or a rally or anything armed necessarily means that I'm sure there could be an agent provocateur somewhere.
Yeah.
But when you put yourself on an equal footing with the police, they tend to follow the Constitution a bit more when they realize that you're exercising your Second Amendment, which, again, is there to make sure all of your other amendments stay put. And that's all I wanted to say. I just want to disagree with that point. I think the men and women that go to the protests and rallies that are going on right now armed, it's not a really bad idea. It's actually a really great idea. It shows the government that the people that are there are serious. And don't get me wrong, I know there's an opportunity for an agent provocateur.
From a tactical point of view, you're absolutely correct. But politics is perception. And I'm looking at this from the point of view of perception management, which is that you've got a hostile corporate media, which will portray those protesters carrying arms in a very negative light. And unless the viewing audience, the reading audience, the perceptors, if you will, are aware of the government's media manipulation tricks, they might tend to think about that. Now, if you've got a group of unarmed protesters and the police are abusing them, the perception is going to be that the police are wrong. Think about Gandhi and the way he organized his protests. Now, Gandhi believed in gun rights, but he never allowed any of the marches or protests that he was in charge of to be armed. For that very reason, he wanted the other side to commit the acts of violence and be judged by the world.
Well, I wish, Mr. Rivero, I wish there was a Gandhi that could somehow organize us in some fashion that we could peacefully boycott / protest and end the ridiculousness of our federal government. But unfortunately, I think that'll see a lot of people hurt. You know, just being the peaceful protest route. I mean, I'm not advocating violence. However, by putting yourself on an equally armed footing with people, they are much less likely to try to violate your rights.
Well, I see your point.
The right to peacefully protest, I agree with you in a way. But on the same token, just to say that anybody who's carrying a firearm to a protest and wearing a mask during a pandemic where you're supposed to be legally in some states at this point, wearing a mask, just because they're wearing a mask doesn't mean anything at this point. For someone to go to a protest, armed, if you have to go back to your daily life, and live your life, you may not exactly want to put your face out there saying, hey, but on the same token, you want to participate. But, to say that a masked person with a firearm at a rally is an agent provocateur, I think is a little overreaching. That's all I wanted to say.
I think I said that they might be an agent provocateur. And again, getting back to politics is perception. If you have a protest like that where the protesters are armed, it takes only one agent provocateur firing a shot at the cops and the whole thing just comes apart. I mean, we just had the anniversary of Kent State, I think it was last week. And the story that emerged of that is that shooting all began with an FBI undercover informant and a starter pistol.
Understood, but the same could be the same could be achieved at a rally full of unarmed people. And you could just have a firing squad of police just firing into an unarmed crowd, which would be any way you paint it, whether the protesters are armed or not. Any agent provocateur doing anything that provokes either side into violence is horrible. But whether or not the people that are protesting are armed or not, it could still happen. Either way you look at it. If they want to promote violence from the police to the public, they'll find a way to do it, regardless of whether the public is armed and not armed or they're in panda suits. It makes no difference. They'll figure out a way if they really want to push the issue.
Unfortunately,
thank you,
are
Mr.
correct.
Rivera. You have a great show, and thank you for everything you do. Take care now.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Joe in Houston. Joe, I may have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind today?
Well, I wanted to talk about that shooting in Georgia. That's interesting to me because I called you a couple months ago in Tennessee. There was a murder about 10 miles from my house at the Pilot gas station where this black truck driver from North Carolina with a Muslim name stabbed and slaughtered 3 women that worked there, ladies that sell you lottery tickets and hot dogs and stuff. And he had a little notebook, and the police shot him, killed him, thank God. But now since there's no trial, they don't even tell you what was in the notebook, and it was a racial slaughter, women, 3 women, white women. And so now, there's a big difference in that case, the innocent women that just working, slaughtered by a rabid Muslim, black man. Nothing. No, nothing. No DAs. No one. Nothing. You're not hearing about it. You didn't hear a word about it. But
No.
this guy that gets shot in Georgia, the jogger, right? The jogger that they have videos of, like snooping around at construction sites. He wasn't jogging around when he was entering those construction sites looking for something to steal, probably. I mean, I don't know why he, so the jogger, I like that, this is really funny that he's like the jogger just jogging around, like snooping into construction sites where people have been reporting missing tools and things. And then if you watch what you do, you can
Joe,
see on the video.
Joe, I got to put you on hold. I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm
Okay.
going to come right back to you. Welcome back to our show. Here we're talking with Joe in Houston. We're talking about the Georgia shooting, Ahmaud Arbery, and the surveillance video that has surfaced showing him entering into a home where $2,500 worth of fishing gear had been stolen earlier this year. So it's less than clear cut that he was just an innocent jogger. But again, politics is perception, and I'm sure they're going to treat this case very delicately because of the spin the media is already putting on it of, poor innocent black guy gunned down by two white supremacists.
Well, yeah, but I mean, and just the video, if you watch the video that they show you, the white pickup truck stops, okay? Now, the jogger, let's just call him that, goes around the passenger side. Now, there's a man, the father's in the back, the bed of the truck with a gun, and the son gets out of the driver's side, and he's on the truck. Now, the jogger runs across in front of the truck and attacks the guy with a gun, which isn't a very smart thing, which makes me think the jogger, besides being a petty burglary thief, is using it to feed his drug problem, because he attacked a man with a gun.
Let's just stick with the facts that we have.
Oh, you can see it. No, you can actually see it in the video. You can watch him run in front of the truck and run to the guy and attack him in a white shirt. He's wearing a white shirt. He runs right across in front of the truck. So they weren't blocking or hindering his progress. He literally came right at the guy with the gun. And that's what makes me think of the fact that he had drugs, or he was on drugs. Now, when you have a gun, I carried guns, I had concealed permits, and I used it twice to avoid violence against myself. And I brandished the weapon, and if the person would have come any closer, I would have had to shoot them, because when you come after a person with a gun, and you're the person with a gun, you either shoot them or they're going to get that gun and shoot you. So it becomes it escalates the situation into use of deadly force. So by attack, this guy's going to beat this charge. I mean, these guys shouldn't be in jail to begin with, and that's why the people that look into it know the whole story. They know this guy's record. This happened 2 months ago. The police know what happened, that this black guy was junked up or was breaking into houses and charged this man. It's a self-defense. And the way this is being, it's going to be Trayvon all over again.
Yes.
And what bothers me is because they just pick these crazy stories. If they're going to make a racial issue, you think they could find a better justified case of racial abuse than this? Because this is not going to pan out. The more this is analyzed and shown, the more people are going to say this is just like Trayvon. He had it coming. He deserved it. But I hear a lot of people say, oh, this is going to be another divide and conquer. And, I get tired of hearing about dividing and conquering. I don't want to be unified with people that will defend criminals like that. I want to be divided from them. You know what I'm saying? This whole idea is like, the Jews or the New World Order, they want to keep us all separated. Well, I got news for you. We should be separated on certain issues. There are a lot of scummy people that will come to defense of people just because they share the same skin color. It has nothing to do with the facts of the matter. That this guy was breaking into houses. That was, these two guys, his father and son, probably deserved the medal for trying to protect their neighborhoods. That's what happens down, where you live, where there's not street crime like in Chicago and all these other left-run cities. We protect our neighborhoods. And I'm just tired. It just bothers me that, like I said, 2 months, about the same time this crime happened, some crazed black Muslim truck driver just slaughtered 3 women in my local police station, and you don't hear a peep about it. And that was innocent people being slaughtered by a rabid dog. There's none of this. That was just a monster that deserved to be shot down like the dog that he was by the police. And this case is being so blown out of proportion that they're asking the president questions about it. And everybody knows it's a sham. They got some black Senator Scott down there saying, oh, the president should look into this. Look into what? It's pretty damn obvious what happened. I mean, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to just watch the video and then watch this guy, the jogger, right? Yeah, he jogs into other people's houses and steals fishing equipment. I just love it. It's the same way with Trayvon, the Skittles.
Again, you're assuming that you're making assumptions again that our jogger was the one who stole the fishing gear. That's not what was said. Merely that a theft had happened in that house before. Now, I'm with you. I think this guy just trespassing into the construction site and the home, that's suspicious behavior right there, and you would have probable cause to detain and investigate him.
But they didn't detain him, Mike. That's my point. They never detained him. They stopped their truck in front of him. He ran around the side of the truck. The guy with the gun was on the other side of the truck. He ran across the front of the truck to attack him. He could have kept running. They did not stop him. They did not interfere with his ability to just keep going. That's what's interesting about the video. The video shows the so-called jogger come right across the front of the truck. And they did not stop his progress. He attacked
Joe,
that other man.
We got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. I'm going to try and restart our video feed, see if we can get our picture back. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phone to Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, at least it wasn't, I hate to say it, a Chinese guy, because if it was a Chinese guy delivering egg rolls and wonton soup, Joe probably would have dropped a tactical nuke on the county. Joe, I love when people...
I wish you hadn't said that. There's no decent Chinese food anywhere around where I'm living now, and I've been craving it for weeks.
Really? That's odd, because there's always a Chinese food place, a pizzeria, and a nail salon in every other shopping center.
Well, we've got 3 pizza parlors, but no Chinese food.
Well, I bet you got plenty of nail salons, though.
Yes, we do.
See? It's like that in New Jersey and most of the country. But, Mike, I want to go... A lot of your listeners always call about patriotism, the Constitution. Well, innocent till proven guilty. Like, this guy, was he a criminal? I'd like to see his record.
Yes.
Reese's record. That's it. But I'd like to also see, because wasn't the 2 guys, the father, involved with the DA, and the DA helped him and all that? So, I mean, everybody is, dirty in this, probably, it's I mean, let me tell you, this whole thing, and you know what, hey, Mike, where'd the guy with the video cell phone come from? All of a sudden, he got into the picture.
Yeah,
so, I mean, I don't know what's going on.
That's a real question there. How did he know to get the cell phone video?
At that particular time, right? Maybe the whole thing was a setup. I mean, we don't know. We're just jumping to conclusions, And, what was it Donald Rumsfeld said? The known unknowns or something like that. What you think you know, you might not really know. We'll never know, Come on, guys. We're talking about the government, state government. They're all liars. They all pull all these Assad guesses his own people, But, Mike, Dave from Arizona, do not mute my phone call. Because I think he's the one who says he mutes me. And I don't want him to mute me because I'm going to tell him about why gyms and stuff. Oh, in New Jersey, we only had 59 deaths. And I say we only had 59 deaths today. That's still a lot of people if that's your mom or your dad or your wife or your husband or your kid, Mm-hmm. But, I mean, the reason why is because of that whole, what they call it, the flat line. basically the curve and all that. Everybody's going to get this eventually. It's just you don't want everybody to get it at once. You know, I mean, we don't even know what this is, you know, like that's another thing that's the unknowns, you know, but I mean, like, you just don't poo-poo this and say, well, the gyms are not open. Dude, make your own gym. If you have any area outside, go cut some wood and lift them up as, you know, like Rocky did in Rocky IV, remember? When he went to Russia. You know, I mean, there's things to do to keep it. You don't have to go to the gym. See, a lot of people like to go to the gym to be by other people, but gyms hold a lot of viruses and stuff. So, I mean,
yes.
But I don't even want to know what's the matter, like how you work out wearing a mask or gloves, because that's probably like a nightmare. But, I mean, but, you know, you got to keep precautions. I mean, Mike, you posted on whatharryhappened.com, those people in Colorado at the restaurant, my God, nobody was wearing a mask. Like, that's a petri dish. You know,
well, Dustin, how do you eat your food if you're wearing a mask?
Well, you take it off when you're eating the food, not standing in line. So I know there are people there's people outside waiting in line. And it just seemed like nobody had masks or gloves or anything. You know, and, you know, I feel bad for, like, you know, I can't say it's an older person virus. We just don't know. And Mike, when's the last time Steve Elkins called in? Because I want to find out some more on this Kawasaki disease. Is that what you call that? Kawasaki, with the children are getting this rashes and stuff.
Yeah, that inflammation, the lung inflammation.
Yeah, I read something like it's like a autoimmune defense or something on the child. But I don't know really. I mean, I did like some research, but it's kind of like hard for me to figure that out because I'm not a doctor. You know, even though I did stay at a Holiday Inn. But I just, you know, people got to take precautions because this is not over. You don't know if this is going away because the cases in Germany and South Korea had to re-shut down bars. So there's clusters over there. So this is not going away. I'm just curious, like, what the temperature is in South Korea and Florida and all these other, you know, because this whole temperature thing really, it might not what we think it is, you know, because like, didn't they say it's 98 degrees? This thing would like drop off a cliff, right? But I mean, I don't know, like what that actually means if that gets into your body, because you know your body is like what 98.5, or is that the temperature of your body?
Normal. 98.6 is the average temperature of healthy humans.
Yes, I mean, I always call in. I sound like a broken record to take precautions, you know, because what's wrong with that? You know, what's wrong with just taking basic precautions to protect yourself? The economy's opening back up, but I mean, you got to use street smarts. You got to be, you know, better safe than sorry. You just can't open everything back up where everybody's all gathering in the swimming pools and. You know, I don't think they make masks for swimming pool that cover your. But I mean, you know, obviously those in airplanes and Carnival Cruise Lines, I think is going to be back in. And Mike, real quick before I get off the phone, that guy who said, "Well, the guns bring." I saw a video of a guy carrying a .50 caliber. Dude, the time you get that set up, you'd be dead carrying on your shoulder. I'm sorry, but those guys in Texas, those guys, remember at the bar.
Yes.
They probably got free drinks to go there and hang out. They would have been all wiped out. If you shot at the police, dude, you'll lose. I mean, you'll lose. You think you're going to win, you'll lose. I'm sorry to say, I'm not a big government fan, but I mean, they got Reapers and Hellfires. We don't. Okay, so I mean, you'll lose. They brought an armored vehicle into that bar, and all those guys just put their. Mike, inside every militia, there's an intelligence gatherer waiting to get out. You know that, right?
Yes.
That's it.
I remember when they exposed the communications director of the Tri-States militia turned out to be an undercover FBI informant. By the way, you know, speaking of opening the swimming pools, I'm wondering what chlorine does to the coronavirus. I mean, they're advocating using bleach to sterilize surfaces here. Well, the chlorine they put in swimming pools is basically diluted bleach, diluted chlorine. Swimming pools might turn out to be some of the safest places you can be at. Okay, so let's see. Go back to the phones to Miles in Maine. Hello, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Michael. I'm looking forward to Dustin taking the first vaccine that comes out. And I just wonder who told Dustin that anybody ever wants to shoot it out with the police. I mean, I think people carrying their guns to a protest, we saw the one that they did in Virginia. It was peaceful. I think it's a valuable thing. I mean, if we have these rights and we don't use them, you know what happens in that scenario, right,
Yes.
Mike? So,
Yeah,
we've taken this. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, if we have to use the rights or we're going to lose them. I'm just concerned about the public perception.
Well, see, but then that's exactly why we need to do it, because what we've been doing all along is educating the public that an armed society is a polite society, and how many times people defend themselves with firearms. You know, and when you go to these rallies, you're not going to get, like, in my opinion, what happened at Charlottesville and some of these instances, because anybody who would do something like that, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of other people there that are armed that are going to hold them there until they find out what this provocateur or whoever is about. Once that gets exposed, well, then, you know, you're talking about another educational experience where people see who really causes the trouble and where it's coming from. You know, and that brings the point, like Antifa. I never see any of these people go to jail. I see them start all kinds of stuff. They went to Charlottesville. They weren't invited to the rally. The rally had a peaceful permit, and then they started all this, so yet nothing happens to them, but the couple guys defending themselves are doing years and years in prison. So back to my original point, though, I think that, you know, over the years we've been trying to educate people to our right to keep and bear arms and to carry arms. And I think that if we don't exercise that, we'll lose that. We've all, you know, gone through this like laborious task of trying to educate the public that this is our right and we can do it. You know what I mean? I mean, we still got people calling semi-automatic rifles machine guns.
Yes.
So, you know, they need an education. And the case in point is you got all these Democrats and they make all these gun laws, but none of them own guns. None of them know anything about guns. It would be like if you had somebody making the FAA laws that never flew an airplane. You know, it's just ridiculous. So you've got these people that don't know anything about guns. You know, Biden himself, he's calling a rifle a M14. I forget what he was calling it. I forget what he was calling it, but I've heard him call it an AR-14. Yeah, an AR-14. That's it. And so you have these people, and so I think if we don't use these rights and we don't do these things and we don't do it in the right fashion, I think we lose an element there that we have. And I think we don't educate the people and we allow them to be uneducated and miseducated. Because let's face it, Mike, if we're not the people speaking up and talking about it and giving people the right direction, we know what CNN and Fox and any of these other media conglomerates are going to do to us. They're going to eat us up.
Yes.
So anyway, that's all I got to say. Thanks for the...
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. We're going to let you go. I mean, there's merit on both sides of the argument here. I understand the idea of having an armed, peaceful presence to discourage the cops from exceeding their authority. I'm just concerned that what a duplicitous, deceptive government might do to exploit that situation to their own advantage.
Well, I'm not talking about speaking to that. Like I said, nobody's looking for a confrontation with the police, but most of the police will realize that what they've been being told is bad information as well, and especially when they see a peaceful protest and understand that people can exercise this right.
Okay. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Mark, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you know, I was going to talk about those guys in Michigan, and but I'll add this into what Dustin had to say. The problem with Dustin is he's got a New York, New Jersey type of attitude where very few people have guns. They rely on enormous police forces, way too large police forces for their protection, and they're not protected. And they don't understand the real meaning of the Second Amendment. Now, the reason I think it was a good thing what the people in Michigan did is because it serves notice, and it scared the I guess you could say bejesus out of some of the state legislatures who started wearing bulletproof vests. I don't say that they should be threatening anybody, and obviously if there would have been a shootout right there, they'd have probably lost. But the fact of the matter is, police are not equipped, and they do not have the mental attitude to take on a concerned, patriotic citizenry if it ever came down to it. Any sign of organized resistance, they would run. They're not warriors. They used to have it their way, like 10 cops on one guy. And a lot of them, especially in places like New York and New Jersey, don't even know how to shoot. That's why they miss most of the time when they do shoot. There's not going to be, it serves notice on not only the police, it serves on society as a whole. We are not Europe. We're not going to be turned into a tyranny. We're not going to take Bill Gates's poisonous vaccines and continue to eat his GMO poisonous foods or anything else. This is America. And to thank God for the Second Amendment, I call it the teeth of the Constitution. And one more thing, too, Dustin. Do you think wearing a mask really helps? There's many doctors coming out now and saying, some of the best doctors coming out and saying, a mask is detrimental to your health because you're breathing in your own carbon dioxide, which is poison. Okay, I mean, maybe the climate change idiots think it's a good thing because it prevents global warming, but actually it's very bad for you, and you're breathing in your own germs on top of it, and you're not getting the oxygen you need out of those masks. All right, there's no reason for those things. They don't protect you from anything, but they hurt you. This is just the way the establishment pushes things on you. We're supposed to believe in climate change. We're supposed to believe masks and gloves protect you from viruses. We're supposed to believe this and that because they say it. They're wrong. They don't have our best interest in mind. Okay, I wish you'd understand that because a lot of things you're good on, but a lot of things you don't seem to understand. Again, probably because you spent all your life in dumps like New Jersey and New York. I spent a lot of my life there too, but I spent plenty of my life in states like Texas, North Carolina, and other states that I consider real American states. I understand the Constitution and understand certainly the Second Amendment. This country is right now in a very, very serious situation. Are we going to go the way of tyranny, or are we going to have our freedom? And that's what people have to make up their mind. And like I said, we cannot count on the police to protect us. And as you can see, at times the police get out of line. Now, that doesn't mean all the sheriff's department. A lot of the sheriff's departments are really good people. A lot of these sheriffs are standing up because they're constitutional officers, and they get their, they're elected by the people, and they stand up to the tyranny. But most of these big city police, like in New York and New Jersey and places like that, they don't even have a sheriff's department for all intents and purposes. They do. It's a very weakened sheriff's department. It's mostly police chiefs or commissioners that are appointed by the very sleazy politicians that are causing the problems in the first place, and that's what their loyalty is to these politicians. And that's all I got to say, Mike. You have a good day, buddy. Okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're coming up here on our last commercial break, followed by the last segment of our program. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our program today, and looking back on just the last few months of this whole coronavirus. One of our callers really kind of hit it on the head when he said they really don't know. These are all held up as experts. They don't really know, but they don't want to admit they don't know. So everybody's guessing. And it started with that flawed computer model that came out with these insane numbers for the worst case scenario. The media, hungry for sensationalism, grabbed those numbers, put them out there saying this is what's going to happen, and everybody panicked. And then next thing you know, you're being ordered to wear these masks, which are of dubious utility. There was another story that came out today that says, yes, you can get the coronavirus through your eye tissue. Well, unless you're wearing a full-face gas mask, the little cloth mask is of limited utility in the case of infection by eye. And so everybody's out there pushing products, selling products. They're exploiting the fear. And they basically did the stay-at-home orders, and in the process, they wrecked our economy. And it's going to be a long time coming back from that. And our economy, the fact that this one little hysterical news item, really did this much damage shows just how weak and fragile our economy was to begin with. So where are we going to go from here? Well, I'm already seeing around here that a lot of people aren't bothering with the masks anymore. And we're still waiting for things to open up, restaurants to open up. They're not going to be open in our immediate neighborhood, some of them until the end of the month. And again, like I told that other caller, how do you eat your dinner without taking the mask off? Once you take the mask off, what's the point of putting it back on? Everybody's scared. Well, actually, the fear is kind of worn off because, fear is very tiring. Fear has a neurotransmitter all of its own, and when you run out of it, you literally cannot feel afraid anymore. And I think we've hit that point where people are just ready for this nonsense to be over, because the numbers of sick and the dead, and we don't mean to trivialize what these people are going through, but it's not that big a deal. This is a repeat of what happened back in 2009 with what I called the when pigs fly flu, which was a flu that was a combination of human, porcine, and avian DNAs. And they were predicting back then it's going to be a slate wiper. I remember seeing this graphic in National Geographic about, what a huge chunk of the human population was going to succumb to this thing. And it never happened. And you move forward and people say, well, it could have happened, but by golly, we stopped it cold in its tracks. No, it just wasn't that big a deal. And I'm certainly of a mind, I'm not interested in getting a vaccine, certainly not from the guy who gave us Windows Vista and Millennium Edition. And certainly not before other people have it, and I make sure it's not killing them the way the 1976 swine flu vaccine was doing. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer per se. I'm anti-reckless. I'm anti-indemnified corporations dealing in the medical industry. There are better ways to be doing what we're doing, and we better start finding them right now. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN. Please spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We need your help. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.